Hello everybody and welcome to another Unreal Engine tutorial. I'd like to welcome all of those from the Unity sector, and today we are going over data tables. This is a very important step for game development overall, because this allows you to create advanced customization for pretty much anything that you want to do. I use it more primarily for things like, items, or what effect an item has. Maybe you want to create a upgrade chart progression where you can upgrade a tower, and you want to say what that level entails, whether it includes more health or a bigger gun. I mean, the item, it's endless. So this is going to be split into two sections. The first section, we are going to cover data tables in blueprints, and then the second section is going to be covering it in C++. That is going to be ever so slightly longer because there's a little bit more code involved, but I wanted to give you the benefits of utilizing both. So without further ado, let's get started with the blueprints. We're going to create a new folder here, which I am just going to call channel. For the time being, you call this whatever you want to call this. It doesn't matter in the slightest. Now, tables are built into structures. So, we need to create a structure, and this is going to define what's or the columns of our table. So I'm just going to call this example struct for the moment. Ignore my naming conventions. Let's bring you over here because we need you. And here you get this view. Now this is a blueprint version of creating structures. I will go over C++, and you can mix and match. So, don't feel that you need to create a structure here. We will go over the C++ later. But here, we just what we want to call our member variable. So maybe display name. And we want this to be some text. We can add another variable, which we can do up here, and we want to call this, I don't know, is enabled. You could pretty much add anything. You have access to just about anything. The only things I would advise, probably avoiding things like maps. Arrays are fine. You can change things to an array here, but you can see sets and maps are disabled, so don't really try and add those. It's not worth it. If you want to add another, subset, my suggestion would be to create yet another struct that defines what your subset is, and then add it in here as an array. You can do as like a find based on things like display name and stuff like that, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Here's just like default values if you want to change some default values, but we're just going to leave that as it is for the moment. What we want to do now is we want to right click, we want to come under miscellaneous, and here is our data table. Now you see here is immediately say pick row structure, and we get a list of all the structures that are eligible for this. This is including start content and everything else, so you should see a list similar to this if you haven't already created structures. But obviously we want to create our example structure. You can also search for that in here. And then we're going to call this example table. In here, you can now see we have our row name, which is a unique name, our display name, and our enabled flag. We can add something else in here just for, something alternative. And let's just put a static mesh, and we'll put class. There we go. And you can see here it's automatically updated. Now to add a row into this, we have that. We have an index here. We have our unique name, which is not down here. It is, you have to hit F2 or you can just double click on here. And I'm just going to call this row 1. I mean, when you have hundreds of items and everything else, you'll come across your own naming convention. I usually, just for simplicity on being able to search, also put a unique name in here of type name, and I usually make that the first one on mine. Then I usually name that the same. Let me just bring this up. But the same in here. It does double up the items, but it does mean that when you're looping over all of these and you need to compare it to a unique name or something, it's easier to get that name from there than it is to get it from the row name. I will show you what I mean later, but for the time being, this is sort of what I do. So feel free to follow or ignore, whichever. I'm just going to call this, I don't know, cube. Friendly name is enabled. And, oh, did I not choose the right one there? Object reference. There we go. Well, cube. Cube. You see it's automatically filled in the location. This is also a great way of getting where, like the full naming path for an item or an actor or something that you have, and you need to get it into C++ and you need to call it from C++. It's actually quite a good way of doing that. But now that we have that table, we need to learn how to use it. So let's just come into our blueprint first person, open this into full, and we have our editor. Let's have just a custom event. Just going to call it data for the moment. Don't need to worry about what this one's called because it's not really part of the course. And what we can have is if we put in get data table, you can see we have table row. We have get data table row names. And come on, off. Get data table column as string. Now we have these three. I don't tend to use this one down here. As you can see, it says export from the data table all the row from one column. Not really something I tend to use, but it does have its place. Get data table row names. Again, select this. What this will do is return you an array of these row names here. So you can loop over them. If you don't know the name already of your row, that's how you get the full list, and then you can compare those row names to whatever you're currently using. Which is also why, as I said, you can put your unique name in here, and then you can compare the unique name of a row here to the names on your table. But really, at the end of the day, this is the one I tend to use the most. You set your thing. You can see it's already got a row. You can pass in your row name. So if you want to promote that to a variable, compile, save, you've got maybe row 1 in here, and then you get this out row. Now this out row is the struct here. This is what you get, and it will give you basically this entire row here. How you use that, you can either right click and split, which will give you the unique name, display name enabled, and your mesh. Or if I just recombine this, you can drag this out and hit break, and this will give you the same thing. And this is pretty much it. You can probably see that if you've got like items in a database and you want the information on whether that item has a cost, when you want to sell it to vendor, what's the vendor cost, you can just put in the item name into here and then get your details and then grab a cost out of it. So that is pretty much data tables. There's not really a lot to it. It's just a way of storing information. Now, The other aspect of this that you may be interested in is exporting and importing this from another application. Now, if we come to here and come back to our data table, if you right click, you have at the top export to CSV and export to JSON. It really does depend on your preference. CSV is easier if you don't have a lot of subarrays, but do bear in mind that things like this mesh, when it has quotes and everything else in it, it can mess with your CSV. So I tend generally to export as JSON. Now what you will get is, if I open this example export, you'll see now that we have this. This is always going to be a problem. However, I think if I remember rightly, you could just put a new one in here, which we'll call row 2. Display name, I think you can just put in cube 2, change some things, save that, and then I don't think it will complain. So to re-import, what you have is you got this re-import button. If you haven't got a file already set like this, it will automatically ask for it, or you can come in here and set it there, and then you can click re-import and it'll tell you whether it's successful or not. And you see now we've got row 2 with the cube, that's automatically set. Now, if we just re-export that back again, you can see now it's automatically added the text wrapper around, what we need to. So you can be pretty frivolous within here and just name things exactly as you want, or you can create a database in MySQL and import it into here. I don't know if you can do that at runtime. I think that would require things like the data layers and data assets, but that's outside the scope of this video. I just wanted to show you how to create a data table in here. Right. For the C++ side of things, we need to be able to create that structure that we had. So I'm just going to create it in the character class for the time being. Just out of the way, you can create new files for this, but that's not really relevant in here for the time being. So we need to include engine data table. And then what we can do is we can now create our struct. So the struct has to begin with an F, and we can call this example item. Did we call the one in here example? No, example struct. Good. Right, no clashing. And we need to subclass this from a public F table row base. If you do not do this from an F table row base, it will not load when you come to selecting your row for your data table. It will not do it. So it has to come from this. What we also need is our macro, our Unreal Engine macro, and this is going to mark this as an Unreal struct. This is going to be a, I can't type today, blueprint type. I'm just going to add a category of, I don't know, item. We also need our other macro, generated uStruct body. From here, we just need to add our public variables. And again, here is sort of where you would add your stuff. So for example, F name, unique name, mesh. I've just forward declared this. If you don't know what a forward declare is, I can always do a C++ tutorial for Unreal Engine and general C++. But we also need, again, we need our macros. So I'm just going to lift one of these. Anywhere, blueprint, read, write, category, item, and we don't need to care about that. And we're just going to copy that for all of these and then space this out so we're not looking mad. So we have our example data table row. There we go. If you don't see the successful, then you've probably made a typo somewhere along those lines. But in here, what do we call this? Example item. If I create a new data table, we now have our example item. And this now has the same properties as you can see here. How is this useful? This is useful if you need to access the struct details in C++. Generally, I would advise always creating this in C++ if you're using a C++ project. I would not recommend doing this specifically just for a blueprint only project, because then you'll be adding C++ to a project that is just for blueprints. But if you're doing a C++ project and you have it, it probably is worth doing it here, because then you don't need to go through the hassle of migrating it later. It is always recommended that blueprints are migrated to C++ after you've finished prototyping. So we have that. Now, how do we access it? Well, we need a property, maybe in our character here, just for ease of access. I'm just going to just dump it in here. And we need our, where's our read write? I'm just going to grab that for our prototype, and we can forward declare a u data table. It will have to be a pointer, and I'm just going to call this data table. We have our successful build and what that allows us to do. Can I import? Yeah, I thought it would complain a little bit. It's a little too hopeful for adding that. Let's just add that. You can in here also shift and right click a property, come into the next row, shift left click, and it will paste it right into your item. But we got our character blueprint, first person character. Let's just get rid of that for the moment. If we come to our class defaults, we should have data table. And this we can then set to our data table that we have created. Now that means, again, that we can have access to that, but it also means that if it's set, we now have access in our character class here. So, say for begin play, we want to grab the information from our row 1, which I'm just going to copy that name just to make sure I don't get this wrong. And we want to call this is F, and we called this example item. So F example item, just say row, and this is going to be our data table. And we want to find row, and this is going to be an F example item. This is part of templating, and this just means that it knows what to put the data into to return. Templating is a C++ thing, and it is a very long conversation. So this is going to be F name. We're going to call that, how many quotes do you need? Jeez. And then they're going to have an empty one here. I don't use the context string ever, I don't believe, and I don't use the warn, so that tends to be all I need to do. And then if row will do a check effectively the same as is not null pointer. They automatically have this built in. And then we have our row here, which we can then actually set. Now, what should we set? We can set the... Let's add a mesh. Actually, can we add mesh? Okay, we're going to add a static mesh comp to our thing. In here, we are... Copy that. This is going to be a static. And we call this static mesh comp, which I'm just going to add to here. And this is going to be added to our capsule component. And we're going to call this static mesh. So if we found our row 1, I want to set static mesh, and we'll call this row static mesh. Okay, so in here we now have our static mesh component. It is blank. I'm going to move you all the way out here so it is in front of our thing. You have to make sure that our data table is set correctly on here, because if it doesn't find the row, it's not going to display that. But in theory now, I have this cube. Maybe I'll put that a little bit further away. There we go. We have our cube. So that is an example of data tables in C++, and that gives you a sort of introduction as to what you can do with them. You can use this for full inventory systems. I have done that many times. And, you know, full item management and all sorts of things. You can store arrays of these structures and save those out, because they are, you know, you can serialize these to the save files. You can do an awful lot with them, but that is pretty much going to be it for the data tables and data tables in C++. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll see if I can get back to you. But thank you very much for joining, and I will see you next time, guys. Bye for now. Bye-bye.